Diamonds bling, Carol singing.
Hi friends, it's Gwen. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with the most exciting video of the entire year. My best and worst of 2022. If you listen to my podcast, you already know my top 5 worst books of the year and my top 5 best books of the year. I also share some reading stats, and I had my friend Jessie from Reading with Jess on, and she shared her top 5 worst and her top 5 best. So if you're interested in that, like, check it out. There's also a giveaway associated with my podcast. I'm doing giveaways every single day leading through the 12 days of Christmas, and I'm just so excited because I share a lot of fun content over there that I don't share here. But I know you're here for my list, so let's go ahead and jump in. I like to do my worst books first, and then I jump into my best books. I don't have any of my worst books to actually show you, so I'm just going to be popping in some pictures over here for you. And then for my best books, of course, I have all of them. So I'm very excited to share. But before we actually jump into the list, I want you to hop down in the comments and leave me the worst book that you read this year, your favorite book that you read this year, and your most anticipated book of 2023. I'm just very excited. Let's get started. Coming in at number 10 is The Halloween Tree by Ray Bradbury. This, I should have known that I wasn't gonna like this. It's Ray Bradbury. It feels like a classic. It's written in 1972. But I read this because I was trying to get into some spooky middle grade books during the Halloween season. I did do Bookathon with my friends Keisha and Gabby. So much fun during that readathon, but I was trying to get in the mood, pick this up kind of because it was a classic. I figured it has to be a classic for a reason, right? I did not vibe with the story. I didn't understand the point. It's basically these friends that gather for Halloween. They're all dressed up in their costumes, and they get whisked away on this like kite/broom by Mr. Moundstroud, and they go around the world trying to find their friend Pippin, and also just like to find out the meaning behind Halloween. But they go to different countries and stuff like that, like Egypt, and they find out like their culture and what Halloween means to them. Coming in at number 9 is The Witches of Moonshine Manor by Bianca Moraes. I'm so sad to have this as one of my worst reads of the year. One of my patrons so kindly sent this book to me, but this one follows a group of octogenarian witches who are fighting these men in their town who are trying to take over ownership of their manor because they're behind on their mortgage payments, and they want to turn it into this like men's world club or whatever, which like, ew. But they have a way to maybe come up with the mortgage payment, but one of their sisters has been behind bars, and now like she's coming out and she's the only one that knows the location to this like artifact. It's this like fantasy kind of book. I'm not really into fantasy. I didn't really like the characters that much. There were some things like that made me feel icky the way they were discussed, and I just felt like the author was trying to like push their agenda and their views on me as the reader, and I really don't like that in my fiction. So that's why it's on this list. Coming in at number 8 is Tell Me an Ending by Jo Harkin. I was getting into a little bit of sci-fi. I was kind of like dipping my toes in, dabbling around with sci-fi this year, which I absolutely loved, and I plan to continue in 2023. But this one is about memories, and what if you could erase memories? So you follow a couple of different people as they have either decided to have their memories erased and they're thinking about having them restored, because we live in a world where you can erase your memories, but now you can get them restored if you want. So you follow several different people as they are like, kind of, you're finding out what their secret was, the repercussions of if they got it restored, and all of that. But what made this make my list is that the characters, I never felt like I got to know them. I spent a large amount of time with them because the chapters were very long and each one followed a different character. So it was almost told in parts. Like you had the setup, getting to know each character in all these chapters, the next part of their story, every single character, and then the last part, every single character. And I just didn't like the way it was like formatted as a story. I think it could, like, shorter chapters would have really benefited, but I didn't like the characters. I wasn't getting to know them. The plot was super slow moving because of the way it was told, and I don't know, it wasn't for me. But I am still a sci-fi noob, so if it sounds interesting to you and you decide to read it, let me know your thoughts, because I want to hear from someone that reads more sci-fi than I do if I just like totally didn't understand, which would not be surprising. Number 7 goes to Deep Water by Emma Bamford, which I love this cover so much, so it makes me so sad to have it on this list. But alas, it was just not what the synopsis said it was going to deliver. It didn't. So this is supposed to be where a couple gets this boat, they renovate it, and they sail off to visit this island. But so much of the story is them like getting the ship ready, being on the actual boat on the way to the island. It does have a little bit of island vibes. It just wasn't very suspenseful. It was very slow paced. And I know the author is like, has lived on a yacht herself and has, you know, been in Malaysia and all of that. It felt more like the traveling to the island than actually like what happened on the island. So I feel like if that part would have been shorter and the island part would have been a larger part of the story, I possibly would have liked this more. But I think the author leaned into their strength, so I understand. Coming in at number 6 is Fool Me Once by Ashley Winstead. I did not like this romance book at all. I would definitely classify it as a contemporary story with a dash of romance, and if I would have known that going in, I definitely would not have picked it up, but I kind of did read it for my podcast too, so like, anyway, I wasn't a super fan of Ashley Winstead's debut, In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. It was an average, okay thriller, but when I saw that she was doing a romance and a thriller this year, I was like, wow, let me go ahead and pick up both of these. Maybe I'll like her as a romance author better than I do a thriller writer. The answer is no. But this one was just, it leaned too far political for me. You guys know I don't like politics in my books unless it's like a nonfiction book. I'm pretty much not gonna like the politics. That's just a given for me, because I always feel like the author's pushing their agenda, and I don't like that. If it makes sense in the story, like, okay, and I guess this part did, but I just was expecting a romance story, and that's not what I got. So you have these two people that have known each other for the past. Now they're working on this like project together, and it's like an enemies to lovers second chance romance, and it didn't work. I didn't like the main character Lee. I wasn't really rooting for the romance, didn't feel the chemistry between them. It felt very stereotypical, and it just wasn't a romance book. It was contemporary with a dash of romance, and the romance wasn't that great, so there you go. All right, so now we're into my top 5. These are the books that I shared over on my podcast. Coming in at number 5 is The Pallbearers Club by Paul Tremblay. This book, I really didn't understand the point. For some reason, I was super hyped about this book, and I think it's just like my history with Paul Tremblay and The Cabin at the End of the World. I'm always searching for the next book like that, or that gives me those feelings, and this one sadly did not. It's a meandering plot about this boy who had an experience in high school where he created this Pallbearers Club, and he met this girl in the club, and then it's like their friendship over this story. But the cool thing about the book is that it's written like he's writing a memoir, and then she's writing all these annotations on the side. So the experience of reading it was actually really fun. I listened to the audiobook as well, and I really like how the book is laid out. I thought that was very unique and fun, but the story itself just did not work. It felt repetitive, confusing, and not in a good way. So yeah, The Pallbearers Club by Paul Tremblay comes in at number 5. Number 4 is Cherishpharah by Bethany C. Morrow. This is a social commentary horror novel about these two black girls. One has like black parents, one has white parents, and they're best friends, almost like sisters, and there's secrets and stuff like that revealed. Again, I just did not understand the writing, the metaphors, the analogies, what ultimately happened at the end. I just didn't get it. And as I was reading it, I was sure I was going to DNF this one, but the review said at 50% it picks up, at 50% it picks up. I was like, okay, I'll keep going. And I kept reading and I still don't understand what ultimately happened in this one. So that's why it comes in at number 4 on this list. Another book I was confused by, coming in at number 3, A Cosmology of Monsters by Sean Hamill. This is a book that I ended up halfway buddy reading with my friend Keisha from A Book Like You. She enjoyed it much more than I did. But the audiobook experience of this is amazing. I would highly recommend the audiobook if it sounds like something you do want to read. So this one is a horror novel about this family that creates, well, the dad has this idea to create this haunted house attraction in the backyard of their home, and he becomes really obsessed with doing this. So it's kind of like this family attraction horror haunted house thing in their backyard, but the youngest of the children encounters a monster, and I didn't understand the story. In the beginning, it has like part 1 where it's kind of telling the story of the mom and dad and like how they met and how they got together and, you know, how this family got formed and stuff. And that was actually pretty interesting. But once you got to the actual part with the dad and like what happened with the dad, I didn't understand. What happened with the other siblings, I didn't understand. The monster part, I didn't understand. And the parts that I actually did, which was very, very small portion of the book, but the parts that I did understand, I didn't really like. So yeah. All right, so this next book is a little different. I did not dislike this book. I mean, objectively, I would probably rate it 5 stars, but it was just so traumatizing to read. I'm talking about The Girl Next Door by Jack Ketchum. Y'all, I cannot do extreme horror like this. This was just so traumatizing to read. This tells the story of 2 girls who got taken in by their aunt and were abused by their aunt and their cousins. So this is actually based off of it's a fictionalized account of true events which happened to 16-year-old Sylvia Likens in 1965. There are warnings about this book to not read unless you like really, really dark stuff, and I would totally agree. So while I did like the story and the writing and all of that, as a fiction book, it would have been hard to read, but knowing it's based on true events, it made it even harder to read about. I actually left this unrated on Goodreads, and I have seen that other readers have done that as well, because you don't want to put a 5-star on a book like this, because you just can't. It messed with me psychologically for a while after reading it, and I realized like I need to read all of the happy things because this put me in a very dark mental health space. So I hesitate even putting it on this list or even talking about this book because it kind of takes me back, but I'm definitely interested in reading more by this author, just maybe some more fiction stories. But I heard he writes really dark stuff, so I'm definitely gonna have to prepare myself. And the number 1 book that I did not like this year was Lisi's Story by Stephen King. This book is over 500 pages. And I didn't understand any of it. It's about this woman named Lisi, whose husband was an author, and he has died. And you're hearing about Lacey in the present and kind of her husband's past. And that's all I really know. I mean, I didn't understand. And for a 500-page novel, I don't know, was it magical? Was I supposed to understand? But it actually had like words and phrases that are not part of the English language used in this book constantly that I just didn't I think it was like trying to confuse me on purpose. So my worst read of the year, Lisi's Story by Stephen King. But now let's talk about the best books that I read this year. Favorite reads of the year, the best of 2022. I think there's going to be some surprises on this list, y'all. So let's go ahead and get started with number 10, working from the bottom to my very favorite read of the year at number 1. So number 10 is A History of Wild Places by 𝒎𝒏𝒂𝒃. I read this in November and absolutely loved it. The writing, the atmosphere, the characters, the way the story was told, the reveals. I put this book off for a while because a lot of people were saying it was fantasy, magical realism, and those are like anti-buzzwords for me. Like I hear them and I'm like, that book is not for me. And this book is really divided. I think people either love it or hate it. I obviously absolutely loved it, but it tells the story of this man named Travis Wren who can hold an object and kind of tell what happened to that owners of that object. So he's following the leads to find this author, Maggie St. James, and it leads him to this community that's kind of this urban legend, and then it switches and it follows Theo, Calla, and B, and they actually live in a community called Pastoral, and it's kind of like this like cultish kind of vibe, closed off communal community. They never leave the community because there's rot on the outside, and anybody that has ever tried to leave has gotten sick and brought the sickness to the community. So the leader of the community, you know, keeps everybody in. They can't ever leave. But there's something that happens in the community where they need to go outside, and it's like, are they going to be able to get outside and get the help that they need? What happened to Maggie St. James? Who are these people? Are they ever going to leave? Where is Travis? What is he doing? And I was really surprised by the twist, and I really loved the twist. So if you're looking for an atmospheric read, definitely consider A History of Wild Places by 𝒎𝒏𝒂𝒃. Coming in at number 9 is The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. Guys, I loved this book. This is like a paranormal romance story. It's about our main character, Florence Day, who is a ghostwriter for a famous romance author, and she's on deadline with a new editor, and the editor does not give her the extension that she wants, and he's like, you need to turn in the, you know, manuscript the next day, but she gets called away from the city and has to go home to her small town. Her family owns this like funeral house and stuff like that, but her dad has died. And one thing that was really cool about her and her dad is that they can see ghosts and talk to ghosts and, you know, all of that. So she goes home for her father's funeral, and she actually finds that a ghost pops up on the doorstep, and it's her trying to figure out how to help this ghost like move on. And there's like a little romance going on, and it made me laugh, it made me cry, and it was just so different and unique from anything I've ever read. So I would highly recommend The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. Next up, super fun read this year, My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix comes in at number 8. This was just a really fun reading experience. Like, it is a young adult horror novel, but I loved it, and I don't read much like YA, much less YA horror, so I just love Grady Hendrix' writing. I love the friendship vibes. These friends, they met when they were like really young, and they just remained friends like through elementary and middle school, and now they're in high school, and something has happened to Gretchen. She's changed, she's not acting like herself, and her friend Abby is determined to find out what exactly is going on and get to the bottom of it, because everybody else around them, other friends, the adults, the teachers, the parents, are like ignoring all of the signs. The ending was very unexpected and beautiful, and I just, then I watched the movie. I did like a movie watch of this, and that was also fun. So yeah, and I love this cover so much. So yeah, if you're looking for like an 80s friendship story with like some horror elements, definitely check out My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. Coming in at number 7, shocking, The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead. Like I said in my worst list, I wasn't a big fan of Ashley Winstead's debut. She came out with a romance and a thriller book this year, and I absolutely loved this thriller. It was dark, it was gritty, it does have like content warnings and trigger warnings, so definitely, you know, look those up. I think they're right here in the beginning too, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, It has a list here right in the beginning, so you do know what you're getting into before you jump into the novel. But this is about a woman that, you know, when she was in college, one of her best friends committed suicide, and now many years later, she's listening to this podcast and she finds out that another one of her friends from college, her very close friends, committed suicide. And the podcast host and teams up with her, and they go kind of like find out, because they don't think it's suicide. They don't think that she would kill herself. And then they kind of go back to this college town together, and just things are unearthed from the past. And it also has kind of like cultish vibes, but not like you're thinking. So definitely look up content warnings if you need those, but it was really dark. It was really gritty. Coming in at number 6 is Such Sharp Teeth by Rachel Harrison. I absolutely loved this. People are calling this cozy horror. I'm not sure. I'm still new to the horror genre, but if this is cozy horror, I loved this. So I'm going to be looking for more cozy horror to add to my TBR. But this is the first book that I read by this author, and I'm very excited that one of my patrons got me the other books by this author so I can read those in 2023. But this follows our main character, Rory. She's going to her hometown to help her sister. Her sister Scarlett is pregnant, and Rory's just kind of there to help out and stuff. But she ends up going out to the bar one night, and on her way home she gets into an accident. She hits a werewolf. The werewolf bites her, and then she starts transforming into a werewolf, ? And I loved it. I love the pacing. There's a little bit of romance in here. There's the sisterhood dynamics, and it was just overall a really fun. It has some gruesome body horror, and we're talking werewolves. Werewolves eat meat, so it was like, ugh, disgusting. But anyway, really enjoyed this and can't wait to read more. All right, coming in at number 5, Carrie Soto Was Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I love Taylor Jenkins Reid. I love her writing. I love her character. She's my favorite author of all time. I've never rated one of her books lower than 4 stars, and I only had 1 4 stars. All of the rest have been 5 stars. So I really love this one. It's about this retired tennis star that wants to go back and get another Grand Slam because her title has been challenged and she wants to hold the title. So it is very heavily tennis focused. And I don't watch tennis. I'm not like a sports girly, but this book made me care about tennis in ways I never knew it would happen. I also really like the father-daughter relationship in here. That was really sweet. And just seeing this woman so focused on her goal and her dreams, you know? So I would highly recommend this, even if a tennis story doesn't sound like something you would like. Coming in at number 4 is The Perfect Child by Lucinda Berry. So I actually read a few Lucinda Berry books this year, and I just had to pick this one as my favorite. Somehow I love creepy kid books, and this is about a couple that is having trouble conceiving. They're considering adoption. They both work in the ER. I think like he's a surgeon and she's like a nurse or something like that. And this kid, this young child, comes in severely traumatized, bloody, can't find their parents, and he ends up doing a surgery like on the elbow or something like that. And long story short, they end up taking this kid home while the police and investigators are looking for the child's family. And then they end up adopting the child. And this child is just traumatized. There's a dark history, a dark past, and they kind of regret their decisions because she forms a stronger relationship. The child forms a stronger relationship with the male, and yeah, he's going to work and the wife is staying home, and she's telling him all of these things, and he's like, can't be that bad, can it? There is some crazy stuff that goes down in this one, you guys. It was so good. All right, we are getting into the top 3, and I am so excited to share my all-time favorite books with you. Coming in at number 3 is a very recent read, A Cross-Country Christmas by Courtney Walsh. This is my idea of a perfect rom-com. It was emotional. It was funny. It had so many like romance tropes in it, and I love road trip stories. It was like Christmassy without being too Christmassy. It was heartfelt. The banter. You have two characters that know each other since they were children. Something happened in the past where Lauren is trying to forget Will St. Clair ever existed, but she's trying to get home for the holidays because her brother and his wife are having a baby and she is terrified of flying. So her brother arranges for her to catch a ride from California to Illinois for the holidays, and she's not happy about it, but it's kind of like her last resort, so she does it, and it's just their road trip, and you're discovering like what happened in the past. It's romantic, it's sweet, yeah, it's just it's everything you want, and it's also super short, so as a reader, that's something else you will want. But forced proximity, childhood friends to lovers, enemies to lovers, there's so many good things in here. Definitely pick it up. Number 2 is a book I read very early on in the year, and it has remained my favorite all year long, and that is American Kingpin, the epic hunt for the criminal mastermind behind the Silk Road by Nick Bilton. This is a nonfiction true crime book about this man named Ross Ulbricht, who created this billion-dollar underground dark web site that sold drugs, guns, fake passports, anything that you basically can't normally buy at a store. So in college, he started this thing in his bedroom, and like I said, it kind of blew up, and it is a true story. So that's what makes this so fascinating. I highlighted so much in this book. Like, there are times where I highlighted like every single page of this book. On and on and on. But yeah, it's such a good book. It was so entertaining. There is a movie adaptation, but I was just obsessed with this book. Like, I was so interested in everything it was telling me. I was looking up articles on Google and reading those. I was talking to everyone and anyone that I could about this book, and it has like the characters in the beginning. Well, I say characters, but it's actually like the people. Here's the cast of characters, and it talks about like the Silk Road characters, the law enforcement characters, like DHS was involved, Marco Polo Task Force was involved, FBI, the IRS, the US Attorney's Office, like all of these like real people in real life, and it's just so interesting. It starts with this like little pink pill that gets through airport security, and it just kind of snowballs from there. And of course, they're hunting this guy down to shut down this website, but it kind of got way bigger than he thought it would, and it's just wild. So if you don't read nonfiction, you don't like true crime stories or anything like that, but you like thriller books, I would consider this one because it's super action-packed and interesting. And I'm not going to be surprised if you already know my favorite book of the year, because I have been raving about it since I read it this year. Go ahead, drop your guesses down in the comment section while I take a sip of my hot cocoa. All right, did you have time to type it out? You're probably right. So let's go ahead and reveal Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. I kind of match it today a little bit. I'm going with the blue theme here. Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. Another perfect rom-com, if you ask me. I was so shocked that I loved this one as much as I did, because I know a lot of people were reading Abby Jimenez's trilogy before this and they weren't having positive things to say. So when this came up on like one of the book of the month picks, I just passed on it until I started hearing some reviews that said, oh, it's, you know, worth it. I actually found a copy at the book exchange, snagged it, read it, fell in love. So excited that there's going to be a sequel coming in April. Very excited to read that and see what I think about that. I know my friend Jessie has read that book. She got an arc of it, so she's already read it and said it's worth the read, so I'm excited. But yeah, this is just So good. And like I said, it made me laugh, it made me cry. I love the characters, I love the setting, I love the depth. There's just so much going for this book, you guys. So you have Alexis and Daniel, and Alexis is this big city ER doctor, and you have Daniel who lives in this small town. He's a carpenter, he owns this bed and breakfast, he's the mayor of the town, and it's their love story, and it's the best. So if you haven't read this one, I would highly recommend it. So that concludes my best and worst of 2022. I'm so excited to see what the new year brings. Let me know what you thought of my best and worst down in the comment section down below. Don't forget to leave me what your worst book was, what your favorite book was, and what your most anticipated book of 2023 is. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you're all having a lovely day or night, and I'll see you guys again in another video very soon. Bye, friends.
Sleigh bells ringing, diamonds bling.